People's Speechless Chapter 1. The laughter in the park in the heart of Asheville, North Carolina, where the Blue Ridge Mountains framed the horizon and artisanal coffee shops dotted every corner, Ellie Morgan was a familiar yet overlooked figure. At 40, she was a slight woman with weathered hands and auburn hair tied in a loose braid. Her clothes, faded jeans, a thrift store flannel, and scuffed sneakers marked her as someone who lived on the edges of the city's vibrant, tourist-driven economy. Utah. Ellie worked as a janitor at the community centre and moonlighted as a gardener, tending to the flower beds of Asheville's wealthier neighbourhoods. To most, she was just the woman who swept floors and pulled weeds, her life as unremarkable as her attire. They looked at her clothes and laughed, the picnickers at Riverside Park would later recall, their voices heavy with regret. On a sunny Saturday in June, the park was alive with families, hipsters, and tourists enjoying the annual River Arts Festival. Food trucks lined the pathways and local bands played on a makeshift stage. Ellie was there, not as a guest, but to clean up litter between her shifts at the community centre. Her faded baseball cap shielded her eyes, which burned with a quiet intensity few ever noticed. As she pushed a broom near the riverbank, a group of well-dressed women, tourists in designer sundresses, spotted her. One, a woman named Claire, pointed and giggled. "A look at her outfit," she said loud enough for Ellie to hear. "Is she the park's mascot, or just lost?" The others laughed, their voices carrying over the music. Ellie kept sweeping, her face impassive, but her eyes, deep green and sharp with unspoken stories, flickered with something unyielding. Ellie had grown up in a trailer park on the outskirts of Asheville, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts at a diner. When Ellie was 16, her mother died of cancer, leaving her to fend for herself. She dropped out of school, took odd jobs, and learned to survive on grit and ingenuity. She taught herself to read through library books, wrote poetry in a tattered journal, and found solace in small acts of kindness, like leaving wildflowers on neighbours' porches or feeding stray cats. Her strength wasn't in her bank account, which barely covered rent, but in her spirit, a fire that had carried her through loss and hardship. That afternoon as Ellie worked, a scream pierced the festival's hum. A child, a boy no older than 5, had slipped into the French Broad River, its current stronger than it looked. The crowd froze, panic spreading. The boy's mother, a young woman named Tara, wailed, "Liam, somebody help him." Without hesitation, Ellie dropped her broom and sprinted to the riverbank. The women who'd mocked her gasped, their laughter dying as Ellie dove into the cold water, her flannel clinging to her as she swam toward Liam. The current pulled at her, but she fought it, her arms slicing through the water with a strength that belied her slight frame. She reached Liam, who was gasping and flailing, and held him above the surface, swimming back to shore with steady, determined strokes. The crowd watched, stunned, as Ellie emerged, soaking wet, carrying the boy to safety. Tara rushed forward, sobbing, and took Liam in her arms. Ellie stepped back, shivering but calm, her eyes meeting the crowd's. "They should have looked at her eyes instead," Claire whispered, her voice trembling with awe. Paramedics arrived, checking Liam and wrapping Ellie in a blanket. The festival paused, all eyes on the woman who'd risked her life without a second thought. Tara hugged Ellie, tears streaming. "Thank you," she said. "I don't even know your name." "Ellie Morgan," she replied softly, her voice steady despite the chill. She brushed off the attention and started to walk away, but the crowd wouldn't let her. People approached, asking who she was, how she'd learned to swim like that. Claire, the tourist who'd mocked her, hesitated, then stepped forward. "I'm sorry," she said, her face flushed. "We didn't know. You're incredible." Ellie shrugged, her eyes kind but guarded. "Just did what needed doing," she said, and headed back to her broom. But the incident sparked curiosity. By evening, social media was buzzing with videos of Ellie's rescue, hashtags like #HashRiverHero trending. A local reporter, Mia Chen, tracked Ellie down at the community centre the next day. "People want to know about you," Mia said. "You saved a kid's life." "That's not just anyone." Ellie, mopping the floor, paused. "I'm nobody special," she said. "Just a janitor." Mia wasn't convinced. She dug deeper, interviewing locals, and uncovered fragments of Ellie's life. Her years of quiet generosity, the poetry she never shared, the way she'd helped neighbours during floods and power outages. But there was more to Ellie's story. Something even the town didn't know. Something her eyes hinted at, but her words never revealed. The story might have faded. Another small-town tale, but Liam's rescue was only the beginning. A week later, Mia's article ran in the Asheville Citizen-Times, titled "The Unsung Hero of Riverside Park." It detailed Ellie's bravery, but also hinted at a mystery. Neighbours mentioned Ellie's knack for fixing things, cars, appliances, even a broken generator during a storm. "She's not just a janitor," one said. "She's got skills you don't learn sweeping floors." The article caught the attention of Dr. Rachel Hayes, a history professor at UNC Asheville, who recognized Ellie's name from an old university record. Rachel contacted Mia, revealing a stunning truth. 20 years ago, Ellie Morgan had been accepted to UNC's engineering program on a full scholarship. She'd been a prodigy, designing prototypes for renewable energy systems at 17. But after her mother's death, Ellie vanished from the program, never enrolling. Rachel had always wondered what happened. Mia invited Ellie to a community event at the university, framing it as a thank you for her heroism. Ellie, reluctant but persuaded by Tara's gratitude, agreed. The event was held in a lecture hall, packed with locals, students, and Liam's family. Rachel took the stage, her voice warm but purposeful. "We're here to honour Ellie Morgan," she said, "but there's more to her story than you know." She revealed Ellie's past, a teenage girl who'd won national science fairs, whose designs for solar-powered water pumps could have revolutionised rural communities. Ellie was set to change the world. Rachel said, but life took her down a different path. She gave up her dreams to survive, yet she never stopped helping others. The room was silent, eyes fixed on Ellie, who sat in the back, her flannel shirt out of place among the crowd's polished attire. Rachel continued, "Her designs are still in our archives. They're brilliant. And I believe she has more to give." The revelation stunned the audience. Tara, holding Liam's hand, stood and spoke. "Ellie didn't just save my son," she said. "She's been helping people her whole life, and we never saw it. I judged her by her clothes, and I was wrong." Others followed, neighbours, co-workers, even Claire, who'd come from out of town to attend. "We laughed at her," Claire admitted, her voice breaking. "We should have looked at her eyes. I'm so sorry," Ellie, uncomfortable with the spotlight, stood. "I don't need apologies," she said, her voice steady. "I chose this life. I didn't want fame or money. I wanted to help where I could." She pulled out her journal and read a poem about the river. Its strength, its secrets. Her words, raw and vivid, left the room breathless. The event sparked a movement. Students at UNC Asheville launched a campaign to fund Ellie's old designs, adapting them for local communities. Tara and Mia organised a non-profit, Riverlight Projects, to bring Ellie's ideas to life, focusing on sustainable solutions for rural areas. Ellie, hesitant at first, agreed to consult, her engineering knowledge still sharp despite years of disuse. Riverlight Projects took off, with Ellie's designs powering small farms and community centres across North Carolina. She worked alongside Rachel and a team of students, her quiet confidence inspiring them. Her poetry, published online by Mia, gained a following, its themes of resilience resonating widely. Ellie's life didn't change drastically. She still lived simply, still gardened and cleaned. But she found purpose in mentoring young engineers, especially girls from tough backgrounds. A quiet romance bloomed with Rachel, built on shared passions for learning and community. They never defined it, but their late-night talks over coffee felt like home. At Riverlight's first anniversary, held at Riverside Park, Ellie spoke to a crowd of hundreds. They looked at my clothes and laughed, she said, her eyes bright with purpose. They should have looked at my eyes instead. I'm no hero, just a woman who kept going. But together, we're building something that matters. The crowd stood, silent, then erupted in cheers. Ellie Morgan, the simple woman who tried to save a child, had revealed a truth that left people speechless. Strength wasn't in appearances, but in the courage to act, to create, to endure. She never anticipated. Riverlight Projects, the non-profit born from her rediscovered engineering designs, had grown beyond North Carolina, with pilot programs in rural Tennessee and West Virginia. Solar-powered water pumps and community microgrids, based on Ellie's teenage sketches, now brought clean water and electricity to small towns overlooked by corporate developers. Her poetry, published as River's Edge, had become a quiet sensation, its verses quoted in classrooms and community centres. Yet Ellie remained the same woman, still sweeping floors at the community centre, still tending gardens in her faded flannel, her green eyes carrying the weight of a life shaped by sacrifice. They looked at her clothes and laughed, the locals often recalled, their voices now filled with admiration. They should have looked at her eyes instead. That moment at Riverside Park, when Ellie's courage silenced a mocking crowd, had become Asheville legend. But fame, even local fame, was a double-edged sword. Ellie wasn't used to being seen, and the spotlight brought new pressure. One rainy October afternoon, as Ellie sorted donations at the community centre, Mia Chen, the reporter who'd first shared her story, burst in with news. "Ellie, you've been nominated for the National Community Impact Award," Mia said, her eyes bright. "It's a big deal. Ceremony in Atlanta, televised. They want you to speak." Ellie paused, a box of donated books in her hands. "Me? On TV?" she said, her voice tinged with unease. "I'm not a speaker, Mia. I'm just—" "Don't say just," Mia interrupted, grinning. "You're Ellie Morgan. You saved a kid, revived your old designs and inspired a movement. They need to hear from you." Ellie's partner, Rachel Hayes, the young Cashville professor who'd uncovered her past, nodded from across the room. "She's right, Ellie. This isn't just about you. It's about showing people what's possible. You've already changed lives." Ellie set the box down, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her flannel. She remembered the festival, the laughter at her clothes, the silence after her rescue. She'd faced judgment before and come out stronger. But a national stage with cameras and strangers felt like a different kind of challenge. Her eyes, sharp and steady, met Rachel's. "Okay," she said finally. "But I'm doing it my way." The award ceremony was held in a grand Atlanta convention center, its chandeliers casting light over a sea of suits and evening gowns. Ellie arrived in a simple navy dress she'd sewn herself, her journal tucked in her bag for courage. As she stepped into the hall, she felt the familiar sting of eyes on her, some curious, others skeptical. They looked at her clothes and laughed. A few attendees whispered, noting her lack of designer flair. But Ellie's eyes, burning with quiet resolve, told a different story. Backstage, she met Tara, Liam's mother, who'd driven from Asheville with Liam, now a lively 8-year-old. "You're why we're here," Tara said, hugging her. "Liam talks about you all the time." Liam, clutching a drawing of Ellie pulling him from the river, grinned. "You're my hero, Miss Ellie." Those words steadied her as she took the stage. The audience, a mix of philanthropists, activists and policymakers, watched as Ellie approached the podium. Her voice, soft but clear, cut through the room's hum. "I'm not here because I'm special," she began. "I'm here because I know what it's like to be invisible. I grew up with nothing, lost my mom young, and gave up dreams to survive. But I never stopped believing we can make things better, not with money, but with heart." She shared stories of Riverlight's impact. A Tennessee farmer who now had clean water, a West Virginia school, powered by her microgrid. She read a poem from her journal, its lines about resilience and rivers leaving the room hushed. "They laughed at my clothes once," she said, her eyes sweeping the crowd. "But they should have looked at my eyes. That's where you see what someone's made of." The silence was profound, broken only by a standing ovation. Tara and Liam joined her on stage, Liam holding up his drawing. The image, Ellie as a hero in flannel, flashed on screens, and the crowd's applause grew louder. Claire, the tourist who'd once mocked her, was in the audience, having followed Ellie's story. She stood, tears in her eyes, and clapped hardest of all. The award brought new opportunities but also challenges. Riverlight's success attracted corporate interest, with developers offering partnerships that promised funding but demanded control. One company, Apex Solutions, proposed scaling Riverlight's designs for profit, sidelining the rural communities Ellie prioritized. At a tense meeting in Asheville, Apex's CEO, James Colton, dismissed Ellie's concerns. "You're out of your depth, Ms. Morgan," he said. "This is business, not poetry." Ellie's eyes flashed. "It's not about profit," she said. "It's about people who need these systems to live, not just to make someone rich." Rachel backed her, citing data on the project's impact. The room was split, but Ellie's resolve held firm. She refused the deal, choosing smaller, community-focused funding instead. The decision cost Riverlight some momentum, but it preserved its soul. Ellie worked harder, mentoring students and refining designs. Her evenings with Rachel, sketching plans over tea, became her refuge. "You're unstoppable," Rachel said one night, kissing her forehead. "Even when they tried to push you down." A year later, Riverlight had grown sustainably, with new projects in 5 states. Ellie's story inspired a documentary, Eyes of the River, which aired on PBS, spreading her message further. She remained in Asheville, still cleaning, still gardening, but now teaching engineering workshops at the community centre. Kids like Liam looked up to her, their drawings and letters filling her apartment. At a Riverlight fundraiser, Ellie spoke to a crowd of supporters, including Claire, who'd become a volunteer. "They laughed at my clothes," Ellie said, her voice steady. "They should have looked at my eyes. I'm just one person, but together we're building a future where no one's invisible." The crowd stood, silent, then roared. Ellie Morgan, the simple woman who tried to save a child, had revealed a truth that left people speechless. Strength was in the eyes, in the heart, in the will to keep going.